person comes into the world with an inner design, a kind of map, a seed of potential. You might call it a blueprint for authenticity. Aristotle called it form, the essence that shapes matter into what it is meant to be. For the form is actually of that which exists potentially, he wrote, just as the acorn is potentially the oak, from his Metaphysics. And Jung described the same idea in psychological terms. He called it the self, the totality of who we are and who we can be. The self is not just the ego or the conscious mind, but the deeper intelligence of the psyche that pushes us towards wholeness. Jung wrote, the self is our life's goal, for it is the completest expression of that fateful combination we call individuality. From childhood, we catch glimpses of this blueprint. A child sings naturally, draws naturally, behaves naturally, emotes naturally, is themselves. They show empathy, connection in a way that feels authentic. And these are sparks of the authentic pattern beginning to unfold. Left alone, supported, the child grows like an acorn into its oak. But most of us are not left alone. And most of us are forced to abandon this blueprint by default. Because very early in life, it teaches us that being ourselves so often is risky. Parents, culture, schools and peers tell us what is acceptable and what is not. We learn to override ourselves. Sorry about the banging. So the sensitive boy is turned to man up, stop crying, be big brave boy. So he buries his tears, he swallows his sadness. An artistic girl is told that it won't pay the bill, and so she studies accounting instead. And a curious child who loves exploring is told to sit still, behave and follow the rules. To design, to survive, we have to adapt. And we build what Jung called the persona, the mask designed to fit social expectations, so we get our needs met, so we are included with social animals. Jung described it as a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, fittingly enough, a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. So, within culture, we learn to trade authenticity for belonging. We abandon the blueprint because it seems necessary for love, safety, connection and inclusion. But this bargain has a cost. When we abandon our blueprint, when we abandon ourselves, we begin to live against ourselves. Outwardly, we may appear successful. Inwardly, something starts to ache. Jung observed, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, when we refuse the pain of being true to ourselves, that pain doesn't disappear. It twists itself into symptoms, anxiety, or depression. Most trauma theory supports this. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory shows how our nervous system continually scans for safety. When being authentic itself feels unsafe, the body adapts by shutting down, avoiding, blanking out. It adapts by overworking, becoming what we need to be, or disconnecting. As Deb Dana explains, when connection feels dangerous, the nervous system chooses protection. And this protection often takes the form of self-abandonment. We abandon our own needs, our feelings and our impulses, our desires and our instincts in order to remain acceptable. And over time, this disconnection from our form, as Aristotle puts it, the blueprint of our authenticity, leads to illness. And here is the paradox. Even when we abandon ourselves, the self does not abandon us, because after all, the blueprint exists. Illness, breakdown, and crisis can be understood as the self's protest, the psyche's refusal to let us stray too far from the blueprint. The body-mind says, you cannot keep living this way. Something truer is required. Think of the workaholic who collapses from chronic fatigue. His body refuses to let him continue running on adrenaline forever. Or the lifelong people pleaser who develops fibromyalgia, the one who suppresses her anger, the one who has to always have a smile and be amenable, available. Her muscles ache under the weight of every yes that should have been a no. The body keeps the score, as Bessel van der Kolk said. It holds the memory of what we have lived through when the mind cannot. An illness in this sense is the body keeping the score of self-abandonment and forcing us now to reckon with it, forcing us now to confront and reconnect with it. Jung went even further. He suggested that symptoms are meaningful communications from the self. We do not cure a neurosis by suppressing it, by giving it the chance to express itself. And this is what we must do. And effective neuroscience and all the things we talk about here now 100% support this. And seen in this way, illness is not betrayal, but actually loyalty. It is the self refusing us to let ourselves abandon our nature, our form, our blueprint completely. Aristotle's philosophy gives us another way to picture this. He believed that every living thing has, as I said, a form, an inner principle that defines what it is meant to be. The acorn has the form of the oak. It strives to actualize that potential. And this sort of, this term of being the best version of yourself, I guess, is what this refers to. But of course, that's an ego's version, often saying that rather than the self. If you try to force an acorn to grow into a pine, it would fail. If you planted it in stone, it would struggle. Its essence calls it always back to its essential oakness, even though it's an acorn. And humans too have this form. Each of us carries our essence that longs for realization, longs to grow and develop and be realized. Flourishing for Aristotle meant living in accordance with this inner principle, letting it unfold, and to abandon it or to refuse it was to distort life itself. The good for man, Aristotle wrote, is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue in a complete life. Illness then can be seen as the consequence of our resisting our form. It is the oak tree straining in rocky soil, twisting itself towards the sun, trying to be something it's not. The blueprint insists that we live it. Jung described the psyche as teleological, not only driven by the past, but oriented towards the future, towards wholeness, just as Aristotle detailed. He said the psyche has a natural tendency towards self-healing, and this is 100% true. It means that even in our breakdowns, our illness and crises are not random. They are attempts by the psyche to correct our course, to bring us back to the blueprint. We are a self-correcting, self-balancing, self-regulating system like everything in nature. Kathy Kane, who works with trauma in the body, puts this in practical terms. The body has a profound impulse towards regulation and healing. When given space, it will always move towards coherence. So, when illness arrives, we can ask not only, how do I get rid of this, but recognizing that this illness is trying to bring me back to my blueprint. Consider a real life example. An individual a lawyer, who's always loved teaching children, pressured by her parents to pursue law because it's the right, respectable thing to do with a good income. She buries her dream, and in her 30s she develops severe migraines. Only after stepping away from corporate law and beginning to work in education did the migraines subside. Her illness was the self's protest against abandoning her instinct and her blueprint. Or a man who grew up in a family where showing fear was mocked. He learned to be stoic, unflinching, and by his 40s he suffered crippling panic attacks. Therapy helped him rediscover the child who was terrified but silenced. But by reclaiming his fear, by feeling it, really feeling it, and changing himself to be someone who feels and reclaims his fear, he reclaimed his authenticity and his guidance, the guidance that the fear was giving to him. And in both cases, the illness is not random. It was the psyche refusing to let these people abandon their form, their blueprint. Healing then is not simply about eliminating symptoms. It is a retrieval of the lost parts of ourselves, the blueprint we once abandoned. Deb Dana says, safety is not the absence of threat, it is the presence of connection. And for true healing, we must reconnect with ourselves, not just regulate symptoms. This means asking, what part of myself have I abandoned? What part of myself have I forgotten? What blueprint am I being called back to? What truth is this illness refusing to let me ignore? And when we listen in this way, when we start to communicate with the self in the ways we detail here, if we do parts work, if we listen to our inner child, our inner voice, our inner knowing, we will start to see. We will start to, as we allow our symptoms to come back online and reconnect with that self. And so the illness becomes the teacher, not the enemy. It becomes the compass that points us back to our authentic form. To live authentically is difficult. The world constantly tempts us to betray our blueprint in exchange for approval, belonging, or success. Yet the self does not allow full abandonment. Illness in this light is a fierce kind of loyalty. It is the refusal of the psyche to let us live against ourselves forever and indefinitely. It's the guardian of the blueprint, pulling us back to the form where we were always meant to be. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who we truly are. And Aristotle would agree. The acorn longs to become the oak. In fact, it is its destiny. An illness, therefore, is not a mere breakdown. It is the call of the self, back to the self, the pull of the form, the insistent reminder that our life's work is to stop abandoning ourselves and return naturally, again and again, to the original blueprint of our authentic being.